Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ down there in Tequila, Georgia. Fellow University of North Georgia alumni Matt Green is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. How are you doing this lovely evening?
Many are saying 8-4 feels like 12-0 to a lot of schools. Many programs around college football would kill for 8-4. In a down year, as Ramel Keaton talked about, it's like, hey, going 8-4 is nice, but we have national championship expectations here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So we move forward, and we conclude what was a very, very strange, frustrating, but still relatively positive year 3 in the Josh Heupel tenure in Knoxville, Tennessee, as we wait where the Vols wind up in bowl season. Looks like the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville. Maybe I go. I don't know. I have family down there. I might make the trip down. Who knows? But yeah, it's over. And honestly, it went out great. Joe Milton, 6 TDs. It was fun. Had a little scuffle in the second quarter.
Great little overreaction, right?
What?
It was good. It was fine.
Who, Joe?
I'm just saying.
I mean, that was Joe's best game of his.
On a positive note, but great.
He was great. Like, I'm, as someone who's been very tough on Joe over the course of the year, I would say it would qualify as great. And there's not been many great performances from Joe Milton as a Tennessee quarterback. There's been great stretches. First half against Alabama, as one that really stands out here. But it was a good 3.5 quarters of Joe Milton football until he was pulled for Nico Iamaleava with the game very much out of reach. But there's not really much to say. The Tennessee Sports Guys and I, we broke down the Vandy game earlier today. But I mean, hey, season's over. We're done. It's now portal season, tampering season, and we see what the Vols are going to do to surround Big Bryce Young, Nico Iamaleava going into 2024, sir.
No, I'm sure he played well, right? I mean, it was a good performance from Joe Milton, but does anyone ever play great versus Vanderbilt? It's like, yeah, it's Vanderbilt. Like he played well. It's a positive note, but yeah, congrats. 8-4. It's like we talked about it preseason. It was definitely a possibility. I feel like that's where I felt like Tennessee fans were kind of getting ahead of themselves coming to last year. Like, you guys are not in the position of like, who you're gonna win. Like they're not in a Penn State or something. It's like, okay, we just got to beat Michigan and Ohio State, and that's what's standing in between us and a national championship. Like, it's not just okay, Georgia and Tennessee or Georgia and Alabama. That's where our sights are set. We're gonna go 10-2. We just need to beat one of those teams. So I felt like there were some Tennessee fans that thought they'd already arrived. And it's like, no, you're not necessarily just beat the best teams on your schedule level yet. Like, there's still a little weirdness that can happen. And Missouri was definitely, not weird, but a team that no one was expecting preseason to finish top 10. And obviously that was a team that Tennessee lost to. But yeah, I think we talked about preseason 8-4 wasn't out of the realm of possibility. This is what Tennessee's been for the last decade plus. Like, that's definitely a very good rebuilding year if you're going to 8-4. So I think listening to the podcast a week ago, I felt like you were kind of trying to duck your preseason Tennessee prediction. Like, you were predicted this team to go to a playoff, but you were at least throwing out the possibility of an 8-4.
Well, I said 9-3 was never going to happen. I said the majority of Tennessee fans said that if you did a poll of like all the VolQuest message board posters and all the Tennessee analysts, everyone thought 9-3, like a step back, because you go 10-2 with Hendon last year. You were right there at 11-1 before the fallout in Columbia, and I just looked at it as like either Joe is a Heisman type guy and looks like a number 1 pick in the draft, like just a full, like he really just comes up into his own, and the bombs are there, and he's great and has a Cam Newton type one and done year, in Knoxville, because I mean, he was ranked as the number 1, most intriguing or most important player coming into the year. I forgot who did that, where they had him at number 1. It was like, I don't know, man. I mean, he was he was a hot commodity. Everyone was all in on the 80-yard throws and this, that, and the other, highlighting Manning
80
passing
yards. He's throwing 100 yards.
Well, no, what I'm saying is like everyone was so obsessed with what he could be in this offense, and rightfully so based on what you saw with Hendon Hooker. But what I was saying, I was like, it's a boom or bust type deal. Like there's no middle ground. He's not like a high floor, like steady Eddie, Will Rogers type. He's either going to be really, really good or it's going to be a really frustrating year. And it turned out to be he was really frustrating for the majority of the year.
But you went on the record. Your prediction
I said,
was,
hold on. I said either they would be like 8-4 or 7-5 or 11-1. I said that would be one of the two. I did not pick 9-3 or 10-2.
Predictions. We made our preseason predictions.
And I was like, I'm not going to go against Tennessee and bet on 7-5 and 8-4. But I did say that it would be one or the other. Even on the Vol pods, I said all offseason, I was like, it's going to be one of the two. Like either Tennessee's awesome and even better than a year ago, and Joe's a Heisman favorite, or Joe is rough and this year is rough across the board. But it was a bridge year, and 8-4 in a bridge year, still pretty good. We'll see what happens as they wrap up this recruiting class. A lot more depth coming in next year. Remember, this is a team that was without a lot of Scallies coming in. You lose 30-plus kids when Heupel comes in. The depth wasn't there. It takes time building a college football roster and building an SEC roster that can compete and withstand a lot of injuries throughout the course of a physical, demanding college football season. And the injuries just really, really piled up down the stretch. But ultimately didn't really phase them in terms of what they had to play for and all that. But I don't know. It's fine. Year 3, done, 8-4, and now it's Nico time. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And if you're a Tennessee fan, the best thing you feel right now is you look at Florida's schedule, you look at some of these other SEC schedules going into next year, Matt Green. Tennessee will sleepwalk into 9-3 next year with how easy this schedule is. If Nico is even 3/4 of what he's supposed to be.
Be careful with that talk, sir.
It's the second easiest schedule and
similar.
I mean, Arkansas and Tennessee have the two easiest schedules, I think, in the SEC in 2024. And it's and also getting Vanderbilt locked in as your one permanent rival is just it's a godsend based on how deep this conference is going to be starting next year over year.
Yeah, good for Arkansas. They deserve an easy SEC schedule. And Tennessee obviously been playing Alabama and Georgia every year, but that's not changing in 2024 at least. But I don't know. We'll see. I have a feeling there's still going to be some difficult games on that schedule.
Oh, for
and
sure.
We're talking about
at Oklahoma, the Heupel return. Heupel's first time back at Oklahoma.
Also, Tennessee, I think, had the most seniors of any team on the defensive side of the ball in the SEC this year. Mm-hmm. So it's there's a lot being put on Nico's plate. We'll see if if it is a bounce back year or if it is another 8-4 type of year.
We shall see. We have all off season to talk about what Tennessee will be in 2024, Matt Green. But we need to talk about what actually happened. So before we get into a lot of stuff and some coaching carousel stuff that we won't go too deep on just because I want it to settle by and large, because we'll do when the offseason hits and when we have some breaks in the action to do like best hires, favorite hires, that sort of thing. Because it's a lot of moving parts right now in that regard. So I don't want it to be kind of outdated right out of the gate here. So Matt Green, how do we do on Rivalry Weekend? And before you answer, let the record show I would like the rules to be where if I ended up falling behind because of the expansion in the pick'em this week, then it's tossed out and it's like hey, congratulations a little bit for you. But if I won either way, then we can keep it and count it towards the final pick'em. So it really comes down to how how I did, whether or not the rules and your expansion of the pick'em this week stand. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely not. Not fair at all. This is garbage rules you're trying to throw in here at the end. But I didn't actually tally the additional game. So I think looking at the against the spread, I think you may have I added it all up, but I didn't break it down versus like our original 10 versus those ones we added in. But I think the extra ones, I think you had a lot of success with those. So that may have actually improved your record against the spread. But overall, this past week, we were killing it on Rivalry Week. Overall, that is, not necessarily against the spread. I went 15-4 in our 19 games. overall. You went 14-5. So I picked up a game there, but you're still sitting at 103-48 to my 151. So 3 game lead overall. And then against the spread this weekend, I went 9-10, and you went 10-9, sir. So you throwing out all these little things before the prefacing the pick'em that you should just been quiet because you had a good week. You once again, really just solidified, your lead against the spread. So you're 86-61-4 on the season to my 79-68-4. So yeah, what is that? A 7-game lead on me. You're hitting 57% against the spread to my 52.3%. Not, I like to be better than that. It's still above 500 like we want to be, but that's not good enough. I got to get better in 2024. And then Zeus, South Carolina, home dog of the week, really let him down. He's 12-5 now on the season. So still looking real solid on the year. What is that? A 70.6% on the season, Zeus, with his home dog of the week. So, it was his birthday this week, so we'll cut him some slack. He may have gotten a little lazy this week.
Well, hey, he gets a bounce back week. It was Turkey week. He had a lot on his plate. Speaking of, what was the Thanksgiving meals for the pups? Did y'all do something special? How did it work out? Does Tori do something special for Thanksgiving? Does she mix and match some of the leftovers for Zeus and Maddox? How does that work?
We didn't have a lot of the leftovers. Like we went to other people's things, so we just kind of, we just did our thing. But I'm sure she threw in some pumpkins, some little Thanksgiving little theme, But yeah, I don't think she went too crazy for Thanksgiving. Not with the day before being the birthday. That was kind of the treat day.
Okay, that's fair. How was the Thanksgiving? What's your go-to? I feel like are you a picky eater? I feel like you are, right?
I'm not too picky. I feel like at Thanksgiving, ham, turkey, they even had some pulled pork and mashed potatoes, a little what is it? Broccoli rice casserole, a little mac and cheese. I had a lot of sides on my plate, so I was eating good.
Do you use stuffing?
To be honest, I don't know where the stuffing was in this particular setup, so I did not eat stuffing in 2023. But I don't avoid it or anything. I'm not a huge casserole guy, just in general. But there's some of the ones that people do that I'll like.
Yeah, I'm not a casserole guy either. I mean, I definitely didn't do broccoli and rice. I'm a pretty picky. I mean, I like green beans and stuff like that. I like it individual. I just don't like to mix and match all these different things. Where marshmallows and sweet potatoes and broccoli and rice casserole. No, let's just keep everything separate. Let's just give them one item at a time. And let me mix and match if that's what I want to do. Just separate them. I want them individual. And I don't know if that's an OCD thing on my part, but I don't know. I never liked
how
that.
I would think of you for sure. But I'm not totally not that way either. I feel like I'm picking up what you're putting down.
There you go. Matt Greenwell, as always, love to hear positive news on the winning front from me with another college football weekend in the books, conference championship weekend right here, and I'm excited. I was talking with the Thomas family group chat over the weekend, and I felt so weird with the Florida State stuff because I shout out to cousin Sam and all my fam who went to FSU and a lot of FSU fans. I felt so weird because the Tennessee game ends and the Iron Bowl is crazy, which was awesome. We'll get into, and then I'm watching that. I think my eyes were still more towards Georgia and Georgia Tech, and that was one I was pretty confident in Tech covering, as we talked about in the pod, and Haynes being a little bit frisky in that game, and he was good, but Buster Faulkner also cooking up a clinic. One of the better OCs this year. Great OC hire by Brent Key and Buster Faulkner, but I was looking at him just like, I don't want you guys to put Florida State in the playoff. I don't want it to happen. It sucks because of the Jordan Travis thing, and it just Tate's not it. And Tate was quite bad in that first half, and Florida should have been up multiple scores, and that's really the reason they lost. Is going 12-7 at the half based on how they played in the first half was was just a nightmare situation for Florida at home, using the crowd and defense playing really well and
that
all
first
that. But
drive was the spitting thing, right? Wasn't that led to the only touchdown drive in the first half?
Yeah. So you look at it and I'm like, what a waste. But I came away feeling pretty bad about Florida State, especially when you see Texas take care of business in a major way. And I don't know. We'll talk about why Texas and Florida State might be linked after next weekend, because I think there's a strong possibility it gets dicey between those two schools, depending on how conference championship weekend unfolds. But ultimately, Matt Green, I want to start with your Georgia Bulldogs. They survived Georgia Tech, win by a little over a touchdown. What was it? 8-point win for the Dogs. Yeah. Tech scores 10 points in the fourth quarter to cover in a major way. But, I'm curious, from your vantage point, what did you see in this game on Saturday night? What did the Jackets do really well that frustrated Georgia, especially on defense with Haynes King and company? Where did Georgia struggle? What did you see from Georgia Tech on Saturday night in Atlanta?
Well, I think there's one thing they did well is they ran the ball, and they had over 200 yards rushing in this game, and that's the third time in the last 4 games that an opponent has had over 150 yards rushing against Georgia. So you're seeing Georgia still able to win some of these games when they're giving up yards on the ground, but that's something you're not used to seeing, especially with a team like Georgia Tech. But they gave Georgia a tough game a year ago. I want to say, was it tied at halftime? I should have looked that up before, but I also feel like the scoreboard this game wasn't as close as the scoreboard looked. Like, it kind of felt like the Vanderbilt game that, you were just kind of cruising, and then Beck throws that almost pick 6 in the Vanderbilt game, and then it's like, okay, now things got interesting. It was like an 8-point game, I think, at one point. But this was like Georgia went up 31-13 late in the third quarter, and Tech had 35% of their offense for the entire game in those final 2 drives after going down 31-13. Like, that still happened, obviously. Like, they made it an 8-point game with like 5 minutes to go. Like, it did still happen, but it just never felt like this game was in doubt. Like, even the turnovers in this one, like, it would have been, I want to say 38-16 or something. Dylan Bell, when they overturned that touchdown in the fourth quarter, and then they drive down and a deflection turns into an interception in the end zone. And that was probably one of the few kind of like bad decision interceptions Carson Beck has made this year. But like, they fumbled on the first offensive play of the game and kind of gave Tech a short field. So it was kind of some things that they kind of beat themselves a little bit. But yeah, I would say I'm not going to try to sugarcoat and kind of undersell like how well they were able to run the ball, because I think that is a concern with what Georgia did against Ole Miss a few weeks ago, and now what they've done against Tech and Missouri. So we've seen multiple teams and what they're going to face from Jalen Milroe and Alabama in the SEC championship. So that's the one, I think, kind of serious thing you can take away from, like, you could actually be concerned watching that Georgia Tech game. But I felt like it was more an easy win than the score really indicated.
It looked like the officiating was pretty bad, and Georgia fans are pretty upset with how this game was officiated. What was some of the stuff that you saw that annoyed you and you thought was pretty bad against Georgia?
Oh, man. I did see a lot of social media talk about the refs. I don't really remember. I mean, I know there was like a face mask at some point that was missed, but
so you didn't feel while watching the game that it was a really poorly officiated game?
I mean, not necessarily. Like, there was one like on the sideline, like, because that was the other thing too. Like Georgia Tech did get stops, but it felt like every stop was kind of Georgia stopped themselves. Like, there was a 3rd and 11 where, kind of similar to the Tennessee game a week ago, where Carson Beck hits Dylan Bell on the sideline, and it's like he caught it, but he re-gripped it on the sideline. I didn't think he actually bobbled it, but he just kind of re-gripped it, and they overturned that and said it wasn't a catch. That kind of ended a drive. But, man, I'm blanking off the top of my head. I feel like there was another one kind of in the end zone, but I can't remember the scenario. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't particularly notice anything like egregious from the referees. I could be wrong.
So if you had to put a bow on it, and like the teams that have been able to run on Georgia 3 of the last 4 times, I can't recall who was the one who couldn't run on Georgia among those 4. Matt Green, but
they ran well on the first play of the game.
I'll have to go back and look at the tape. I'm not sure who you're referring to, but it's ringing a bell, kind of. But I'm just not certain of which one for sure was not able to run on Georgia. If you had to explain why teams are not able to run on Georgia from what you're seeing, is it personnel? Is it just good backs? Is it attrition? Is it young guys on the defensive line and the linebacker room? What would you attest most to why Georgia is bleeding a little bit there on defense?
It's hard to say. I would say almost all of the good runs are coming to the outside. So it's like kind of a setting the edge situation. That's what you saw against Auburn early in the season. Like you just kind of seen at times. And Kirby has said himself, like that's by design. Like you'd rather be giving up runs to the outside than right up the middle, just getting gashed. That's pretty much unstoppable. So obviously you're trying to force stuff to the outside, and Georgia thinks they have the athletes to go sideline to sideline and tackle as well as just about anybody. But, this game, it was kind of a 3-headed monster situation. Like not one guy really just went off on this Georgia defense. I mean, they also 44 carries for 205 yards. It's like yards per carry. That's not like incredible. It is a lot of success on the ground, but I kind of feel like the Ole Miss game was kind of similar. It's like, This was 4.7 yards per carry. So that was probably better than Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss was under 4 yards a carry, but they still just had a good offensive production running the ball. But yeah, it was a little bit of the running backs, a little bit of Haynes King. I think Haynes King is probably the reason, they were able to do a lot of the things they did. He's just, kind of a dual threat quarterback that was able to make some plays with his legs, make a couple good throws, keep some plays alive. Like, I think that's the biggest takeaway I would say, because obviously everyone's going to compare everything Georgia's doing to what Jalen Milroe will do against Georgia. But I don't think the game plan for Jalen Milroe is going to be the same as it is for a Haynes King.
Okay. I like it. Matt Green, 4th and forever. We're going to start with Georgia and Bama because now they're on a collision course in the SEC title game. And I think it's also best for everybody involved, where it's like, I'm glad that game means something, because I would have, look, the Auburn Tigers should have beaten Alabama on Saturday night in the Plains. That should have happened. The punt drop, the muff punt was terrible. And then obviously 4th and forever and rushing 2 that we'll get into in a second here. Auburn should have won this football game. And they did not. It's over. It's tough. Like, I don't know how it's going to be a tough offseason for the Auburn Tigers, and just feeling like you really let one get away. And Alabama just has been finding a way. And I have a stat from Connor O'Gara, friend of the pod of Saturday Down South, that I'll get to in a second, that I thought was awesome in his column recapping this. But, I mean, the 4th and forever touchdown to Isaiah Bond was unbelievable. Like, I lost it in my living room seeing this happen in real time, especially the play right before it. It's like Jalen, like a bad snap, puts him at 4th and forever to begin with, and you're like, oh, wow, this is how it ends. The playoff hopes and everything else, and the House of Horrors continue for Alabama.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that 3rd and goal where he's just chilling, like 2 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, looking for someone to be open, like he probably could have picked up 10-15 on 3rd down to make it a 4th and goal from like the 12 or something.
No, you're right. I mean, it wasn't even close. The him being over the line and getting the penalty there, and that, I mean, all of it was just craziness. And also, if he doesn't do that and he just runs, do they still win? Do they try and run the football on 4th and goal? I mean, that's another part of it. It's like, you look at it and it's like, it happened that way, and you're like, wow, it actually ended up working out for Alabama, that they did get pushed back that far, and that they did find Isaiah Bond in the left corner of the end zone here. But, I mean, Matt, your immediate reaction to Alabama coming from behind, stealing one in Auburn late, a game they had no business winning. What did you make of it?
My immediate reaction was literally, this is the best rivalry in college football. Like,
Ooh.
The Iron Bowl just never misses, man. it's now there's 4 straight games at Jordan-Hare that have either been Auburn wins or Alabama wins by 1 score. Like this is this was probably the play of the season. Like because I think that was really the tone of the whole weekend was this was our closest chaos weekend we had all season, and we didn't even want it this weekend because we wanted all these like quarterfinal matchups in conference championship weekend. So it was like, I don't know. One part of me wants to see Auburn shock the world, but it's like part of me wants the Alabama-Georgia game to be a legit quarterfinal game to get to the playoffs. So I haven't seen like newspaper headlines or anything. Do we have a name for this game yet? I've heard you say 4th and forever. I'm going 1 in a Milroe. How about that? 1 in a Milroe, man. 4th and 31. I saw a stat on the SEC network. The last 3 seasons, teams with 3rd or 4th and 30 plus were 0 for 90 on picking those up. So not even goal or anything, just 3rd and 30 plus, 4th and 30 plus. And now they're 1 for 91 because somehow Milroe is able to pick out Isaiah Bond. It was obviously an insane play. May have gotten away with a little push off in the corner. But I don't know how you don't have 2 guys on every receiver in the end zone. They have to pick up 30 yards. Like the fact that there's a one-on-one matchup, it's like I don't know how that happens when they need 30 yards on one play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think about Milroe. Like, it's just someone I think tweeted it was like Bama's running the Michael Vick 2004 Atlanta Falcons offense on Jalen Milroe. And it really is, where it's just like running around and waiting for something to open up and hoping something opens up and saying a prayer, and it works. And so when it looks bad, it looks really bad. But when it looks good, you're like, man, there's a never say die part to this team that's just. It's really weird to watch Alabama play like this on offense, but I mean, I don't know what to make of them because, I mean, here's that Conor O'Gara stat, Matt Green, and I'm curious what you think about this. I mean, he has this in his column in Saturday Night South that I highly encourage you to go read. Quote, since the start of that 2021 season, Alabama was in a 1-score game in the 4th quarter 18 times in 24 SEC games, including 6 of 8 this season. In those 24 SEC contests over the last 3 years, Saban's squad is 21-3, including an 8-0 mark this year. At some point, it's not just luck. At some point, Alabama and Nick Saban is just an unreal closer and an unreal coach when games are tight, when games are close. I mean, it's one of those, that's like why he's the GOAT stat. And I understand Kirby's at the top of the sport, but I mean, that's bonkers. Like Saban pulling that many wins when they're that close. Just it's unbelievable. Like, I mean, I don't know. What do you make of that?
That is a great stat. I mean, we know Nick Saban is like the greatest college football coach of all time. So it's not surprising, but I'll be honest, that kind of feeds into my thinking of the whole dynasty being dead thing, because this is not how Alabama used to play. They didn't have to escape 75% of their SEC games by 1 score. You know, it's like they used to just murder you until you just questioned your life decisions in the 3rd and 4th quarter. Like they would they were a different level. And now it seems like every good team they play, it's a slugfest. And this is not even a good Auburn team. This is now the 2nd straight time you've gone to Jordan-Hare versus a 6-win Auburn team and had to pull one out of your ass. Honestly, like, I mean, last time they had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and they had to go 98 yards in the final, minute and a half to send it to overtime. So now you're taking a 6-5, now 6-6 Auburn team, like that just got blasted by New Mexico State the week before. And this team was just gashing you left and right. Like the way they were able to run the ball on Alabama was honestly insane. So it was kind of similar to how the Georgia, like this game was obviously way more in the balance than the Georgia Auburn game was, but somehow without any real contribution from the quarterback, like Auburn was able to be in this game in the 4th quarter. And they obviously they should have won this game, like with the muffed punt and the 4th and 31 or 4th and goal from the 31. Like it's definitely one that just got away. Like I honestly, it's one of those, I don't know if it's better to win. Obviously it's always better to win. And it's the in-state bragging rights. But like you beat Alabama, then it's like, why the hell did we go? They beat in 7-5 at that point. Why the hell did we go 7-5 if we're good enough to beat Bama? How do we just get blasted, get boat raced by New Mexico State if we're able to beat Bama? And I think it goes into kind of my feeling of they were probably preparing for Alabama for 2 weeks and overlooking New Mexico State. But why are we not able to overlook New Mexico State and still get a win by 3-4 touchdowns? So it's kind of a catch-22, but I think the biggest thing kind of relaying this, how it's going to apply to Georgia, is you saw how Auburn was attacking Jalen Milroe in this game, like just forcing him to be in the pocket and just making him win from the pocket. But it's like they could do it for 5-6 seconds at a time. And then they're like, I want to sack him. And then they would just lose containment, and then he'd run and he'd take off. So I think you're going to see Georgia do the same thing and just keep him in the pocket the way they kind of did with Joe Milton. But I think you're going to see Georgia play a much more disciplined and defensively, and unlike this Auburn team. So I think that's my biggest takeaway is like you saw what Auburn was trying to do, and you were like, they let him out again. I don't know how. And part of that, obviously, you got to credit Jalen Milroe. He's just an insane athlete. But I that's the biggest thing that I question if they're going to be able to recreate in the SEC championship.
I do love that take, though, that it's like, yeah, it's cool. Like, to your point, like, Saban deserves a lot of credit for being able to continually win football games this way. But to your point, that I think is a really good one, is that, like, it's a bad sign that he's in this many close games in the SEC, that everyone's caught up to him, that he's in one-score games over and over and over again, and he's in a dogfight with bad Auburn teams and back-to-back trips to Jordan-Hare. Like, this is not good that you're in this situation. You shouldn't be down 20-7 at the half to an inferior Tennessee team this year. You shouldn't be in these positions where you have to be excellent down the stretch to survive. And I mean, that's a huge difference between like being Clemson right now and being Nick Saban at Alabama. Like, they were suffering the same thing where they're not doing it. They're not dominating the conference like they've been at the pinnacle of the dynasty. And I don't hate that take. I think it's a good one. With all that being said, how are you feeling about Georgia, Alabama with the college football playoff on the line? But also, are we sure that the loser is officially eliminated, Matt Green? Because what happens if Alabama beats Georgia? Because I know the gut instinct is like, and this is going to be marketed as whoever loses is going to be eliminated from the playoff contention and this, that, and the other. I'm not sure about that based on what happened this weekend. And you're already seeing some of the committee, I think they're looking for a reason not to put Florida State in the Final Four. Matt Green, I ask you, depending on how things shake out, what happens if Alabama beats Georgia? And do you think the Dogs still have a pretty good path to make it into the college football playoff to defend their championship if they were to get upset next weekend in Atlanta?
No, I think all of that chaos had to start this weekend for any sort of loser getting in the college football playoff. Like, I think, and we almost saw it. You know, we almost had Florida State lose. We almost had Washington lose. Like, it was going to take something like that, like a Washington losing to Washington State and then beating Oregon, and then maybe the Pac-12 is left out in general. Maybe Texas jumps them or something like that. But no, I think with all this left, like, I do think a one-loss Georgia would be ahead of a one-loss Ohio State if it's coming down to that next week. But no, I don't really see a path. Like, Iowa's not beating Michigan, right? We can just go ahead and end that right there. Like, Iowa's not beating Michigan. Michigan's in the playoff. The Pac-12 champion is 100% in. It doesn't matter who wins. Like, the Pac-12 champion is in. And then
hold
Florida
on.
State.
Are we sure Oregon, if they win, they're in no matter what?
I think so. I think Oregon's kind of, especially with this kind of crazy weekend we just had, I think Oregon was already thought to be the best one-loss team in the country. I think that was,
which I don't agree with, but yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's head and shoulders that they're better than Texas and Alabama, but I think they definitely made a point over Alabama this weekend. And Texas, they obviously.
But honestly, Texas, if they were playing on a neutral field in Atlanta this weekend, who would you take, Alabama or Oregon? Be honest.
I think I would take Oregon, honestly.
Really?
I think I think this is a flawed Alabama team. Like we saw what Auburn was doing to them this week, like rushing for 250 yards on the ground. Like Bo Nix is a hell of a lot better than what's his name I'm blanking on right now, Peyton Thorne. So yeah, I mean, I think I would definitely take Oregon on a neutral site over Alabama. And I don't see any world where Florida State does not get in the playoff. I think Florida State was actually
I think there's a very
winner.
real world for them.
See, I think Florida State was the biggest winner of the weekend, to be honest, with Georgia beating Georgia Tech by a touchdown, with Washington needing a last-second field goal to beat Washington State. Alabama needed an absolute miracle to beat Auburn. I think Florida State's like, yeah, we're Villar's backup quarterback. We just won in the swamp. Like, say what you want. We won by 2 scores. It didn't feel like a 2-score win, but it was a 2-score win in the end. It's like Florida State. Do I think they're one of the best 4 teams right now? No, but I don't think. I think the committee is overstepping if they're going to say, "Oh, well, you're not as good with this guy in," and just ignore the first 11 games of the season. Like if they're 13-0, you just don't leave them out of the college football playoff.
But what if? Here's my scenario, and this is where I do think they get left out. It's one particular scenario, and Texas needs help. Like Texas, I think it needs some serious help, and they're kind of screwed. It's like you have this best win. I think they still have one of the best wins on the calendar, winning at Alabama this year, and their one loss being to the rival who's a top 10 team this year. I mean, Texas has had the stars align, and it's just an unbelievable record at the top, which just kind of is going to keep them out, where you have to be damn near perfect to make it into this playoff. But I ask you, Matt Green, let's say, this is my chaos theory. If Georgia beats Bama, and then, Bama beats Georgia, excuse me. Florida State wins. Oregon wins. And Michigan wins. Are you sure that the committee will not put one-loss Georgia, if it's a close and Alabama wins on a game-winning field goal, does not put Georgia in that 4th spot over Florida State? Because that would mean they would have to drop Georgia 4 spots from losing to Alabama in that spot, or do they do something hilarious and keep Alabama out and put Texas in or something? Because Texas has if they win in this scenario too, like, do you take the one-loss champ from the Big 12 who beat Alabama, or do you take the one-loss SEC champ who just beat Georgia, the 2-time defending national champions? Like, that's an unbelievable situation for the committee to find themselves in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's tough just because it's the SEC champion, but I don't think.
Do they have a better case than Texas if both win?
I don't think so. I think in that scenario, that's how Texas gets into the playoff. Like I think we all want Florida State to lose because we all.
I have some family that don't, but yes.
Yeah. Neutrally, we all want Florida State to lose because I honestly, I think the best playoff right now, like just watching this 2023 season, the best playoff we can get, in my opinion, is Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, and Texas.
I agree.
Think that would be the most fun, like 4 teams that all feel like they could win it all. Florida State doesn't feel like one of those teams, but who are we to decide? Like, that is what the committee's job is, to decide. But I think all of the chaos really stems from Alabama beating Georgia. It kind of seems like the first step in everyone's chaos theory. So if that doesn't happen, I think everything will be a lot cleaner, to be honest, because I think Texas will have a legitimate argument that right now they're better than Florida State. But I just think, I don't know. Maybe that's the committee's job, but I think that's the committee kind of overstepping a little bit.
That's fair. I'm very curious because I think a lot of people who have Florida State winning out as a lock to make it in, I don't necessarily agree with that, depending on how the other teams look. The one-loss champs look. I wouldn't put it in.
I would definitely put them in the lock category.
But here's the problem. It's the worst conference. It's not even particularly close. Like the ACC has been the worst Power 5 conference this year, and it's not close. And you can't tell me that Florida State has a better win than Texas, as even one, like their one loss is Oklahoma. Florida State, the Bama win is significantly better than that LSU win. The LSU finishes 9-3, but Florida State, UNC finishes 8-4. You look up and down the ACC, Miami was not good. look, it's not their fault. They played at what they can, but like you barely survived in the swamp against a terrible Florida team that went 5-7 or won less than 6 games for the first time back to back in like what 70 years or something. Like, what are we doing here? Like, Florida State's they did what they were supposed to do. They won every game on their calendar, but I do think the committee has to weigh how bad the ACC is compared to the rest of the conferences, because I think the Big 12 was good this year at the top. Oklahoma State had a great run. We'll see what they do against Texas and the top, but I mean, they look like a top 15 team. Oklahoma looks like a top 15 team. Kansas State's been right around there all year. Texas is obviously a top 5 team. I mean, that's great. The top of the Pac-12 has been great. The top of the Big 10 has been great. And the SEC has actually been really down as a whole this year. So I don't know. I don't know what you do. This is why I don't want to be in the committee, because I don't know how you break this down.
Florida State's opponent in the ACC championship will be ranked higher than Texas's opponent. So, I mean, there is that. Like Louisville, I think no one's really impressed after losing to Kentucky, who's probably the 8th, 9th best team in the SEC this year, beating the 2nd best team in the ACC. That's definitely a bad look. But like, is Florida State going to the swamp with their backup quarterback worse than what Alabama did in the Iron Bowl? Like that was a similarly bad Auburn team compared to Florida. Like, they have one more win. They're going to a bowl game. But I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, that like, yeah, Florida State might not look good, but it's going to be very tough for anyone to jump them, in my opinion. Like if they beat Louisville in the ACC championship, like, you're just going to jump in and be like, no, Texas beating Oklahoma State is more impressive. Like, there's nothing more impressive about that. Like, their resume is going to take a hit potentially if Alabama, their best win, is no longer number 7, if Georgia wins and Alabama's number 12 at that point or something like that. So I don't know. I think it's not a great situation to be in, but I'm in that camp of Florida State wins and they're in.
All right. We'll see how it goes, but I think it's going to be interesting to monitor no matter what here, Matt Green. Michigan, they beat Ohio State again. Dan Mullen had a good tweet about this, who also, I love Dan Mullen. I really do. He's great, and he like just casually drops in a reply because some Syracuse fan posted a GIF of a Syracuse Orangemen football player celebrating under Dan Mullen's comment about Ryan Day and Ohio State, and he just comments below casually like, "Oh, love Q's, great program, not going to be the head coach there." It's just, he just breaks the news himself and just replying to some rando on Twitter. I just love that. Dan Mullen's just like scrolling his phone, I imagine, just like watching a TV show on his couch, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm not doing that." But he was talking about, he's like, Jim Harbaugh was 0-5 against Ohio State at one point, and you look at where that rivalry's changed now with Michigan winning 3 straight. It's like Ryan Day, I think he coached a pretty good game. I thought this was a competitive back and forth a contest. And look, the better team won, but I think that's okay. Like, Ohio State never felt like a top 4 team this year. Like we talked about on this podcast week over week, they just never felt like they had the juice that they've had in years past. And a lot of that is Kyle McCord's just not a great quarterback. He's not the CJ Strouds that they've had in years past. The Justin Fields types, he's just not. Like, he's not, I don't think he has that upside. I don't think he has top 5 in the draft upside. So I don't know what they do going into this offseason.
I won't stand for Ohio State's message board slander calling him Kyle Accord. The Honda Accord is just a reliable vehicle, sir. That's about as low-key and reliable as it gets. It might not be Maserati Marv, but I won't stand for any Honda Accord slander.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know what car comparison I would actually compare.
I get it, though. It's a good pun on his name. I'll give you that.
But Accords, yeah, I had one for a long time after I totaled a Lexus in high school. It got like a billion. Car. Yeah, like it got me 1 billion miles. Like that thing just kept going. Those things are tanks. They're consistent. Also cheap to fix. There you go. Free plug, Honda. Missed field goals, though, plagued the Buckeyes. You can maybe nitpick about Ryan Day not being overly aggressive, but it was also like they were in this game late. They couldn't get off the field. The defense couldn't get off the field. But Michigan, they sweep Penn State and Ohio State without Harbaugh. And, I mean, they deserve credit, man. Michigan does it again. They pull it off without their head coach, and they put apart the noise, and they take care of business. What was your strongest takeaway about Michigan finishing undefeated once again?
I would say my strongest take was I did not feel like I was watching the second and third best teams in college football play in this game. Like it was a really competitive game, but like I definitely felt, watching like second quarter, like it seems like Michigan's getting things easier than Ohio State is. It just felt like Michigan was the better team. To your point on Ryan Day, if there's any criticism, obviously you missed that field goal right before the half and it looks a lot worse, but I mean, what did you have? Like 40 seconds left at that point where that 4th and 1 came up. Like they were moving the ball down the field on them. I felt like that was a point where Ohio State needed to stay aggressive, and they could have potentially gotten a 7 before the half. And so just playing it out, running the clock down, and just kicking the field goal, like was it just over 50 yards? And I think it was. I don't think this kicker has hit a 50-yarder yet this year, similar to their last kicker who never hit a 50-yarder in his career. I felt like that's probably the biggest criticism I would give of Ryan Day. But yeah, for the most part, Michigan just looked like the better team. I think these are two average quarterbacks. You're just not used to seeing Ohio State, like you said, with this level of quarterback play. It just feels like that meme that everyone shows with whatever sports car sitting in the trailer park, carport or whatever. Like that's how Marvin Harrison felt. And honestly, all of these receivers, it's like this should be the best. I mean, I think it might still statistically be the best offense in the Big Ten, but there just weren't any good offenses in the Big Ten. It's like this could have, there's no reason that couldn't have been a great offense in college football this year, like it is every year, other than Kyle McCord. So he was definitely the guy that held this offense back this year. JJ McCarthy, you still saw Michigan just run the ball a bunch. And these were two really good defenses. Like, I'm not going to take anything away from that, but neither team was able to just, assert their will on the ground or anything. But JJ McCarthy was fine. He was efficient. I still question his ability to beat any of these teams that they might go up against in the playoff. So yeah, that's probably my biggest take is it's interesting how we do hype up Ohio State, Michigan so much every year. And since the very first year of the playoff, these two teams have one combined playoff win. So Michigan's 0-2 in the playoff. Ohio State is, since their original national championship run in 2014, I think they're like 1-5 in the playoffs. So we're not necessarily watching the best teams in the country play every year in the game. And this year probably that looks like it more than ever to me.
I don't know what to do with Michigan, though, in terms of I always thought they were better than Ohio State, and I would have been surprised if Ohio State won this football game on Saturday. But I just don't know if they're do they feel better right now than they did at this time a year ago?
That's exactly what I was saying on Saturday. Yeah, it's hard to think because as a Georgia fan, I think you're just looking at all these teams can they beat us? Can they? And it's hard to see Michigan much better than the 2021 team or the 2022 team. It's kind of like they seem like they're the same. JJ McCarthy has better stats than last year, but his stats are pretty good last year. It's like he's just fine. Like this running game is obviously really good, but I don't think it's like Nick Chubb, Sony Michel or something like we were kind of expecting this to be like the best, clearly best run game in the country. It's not really that this year. So I'm with you. I don't know exactly what to make of Michigan. They do feel like, they're that blue collar team that plan. They might just be able to get that grimy defense to just shut you down, and you're not going to be able to score more than, 20, 24 points against them. And that might be good enough to win the national championship this year. But compared to those other teams that we're seeing that are potentially going to be in the playoff, I just don't know if this offense stacks up.
No, I agree, but I'm curious to see how it goes. I mean, they have a lot of theirs is like a draw thing. Like, who do they draw in round one and how things work for round two? Because I think they're a matchup team that I'll base my Michigan first playoff victory thoughts based on how they're gonna do draw wise. Because I think they're gonna match up way worse with some teams than with others, but we'll see.
For sure. What do we make of the Ryan Day stuff? Like, this is now the third loss in a row to Michigan. Like, do we need to overreact to this? Is it he can't beat Michigan or what? Like, I saw a stat. He's lost 7 games now in his tenure at Ohio State. 3 of them were to Michigan, and we know assuming this team's going to the college football playoff. Those are 3 teams that went to the college football playoff. And then the other 4 losses, 3 of those are in the college football playoff. So 6 of his 7 losses are to college football playoff teams.
That's really good, is what that says to me. Is like, that's unbelievable that he basically loses no games that he's supposed to, that Ohio State should ever lose. He recruits extremely well. They're a top 3 recruiting machine year over year. He hires well. I think Jim Knowles is a really good defensive coordinator hire to clean that up. Brian Hartline, an expert recruiter, and he slid into that offensive coordinator role just fine at the receiver spot. I mean, Travion Henderson came on late for them. Big time recruit coming out of high school, 5-star kid. Like, that wasn't ultimately, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But like, look, man, if you see what happened at A&M, this can kind of lead us into the head coaching stuff. Is like, who are you getting? Like, who's better than Ryan Day outside of like, you could maybe sell me on Mike Vrabel or something, like the hometown or the former coach, NFL ties. He probably keeps it going. Add more toughness. He feels like somebody you could battle better against Michigan, right? Like, he'll probably instill more of that Midwestern toughness and defense first mentality at Ohio State, this, that, and the other. Like, you could sell me on that, but I'm also like, Ryan Day almost beat Georgia last year. Like, who else almost beat Georgia and was in a position to beat Georgia? And I don't know. I think people overreact, and I like that Dan Mullen tweet of like, look, Harbaugh, we were wondering about this when he was demolishing everybody in the Big Ten early on in that tenure, and then just couldn't beat Ohio State and couldn't finish the drill down the stretch. And then, hey, guess what? Then he started doing it, and it's the same thing with the playoffs. Like, oh, Harbaugh can't win a playoff game. It's like, well, what if he does this year and he just beats Oregon? And then you're like, okay, what's the next thing? You just keep moving the goalpost. But I'm like, trust me, it could be way worse, and you could be in a way worse situation. You get Michigan at home next year and see what happens. But I think a lot of it's just quarterback. You can't miss on these big-time quarterbacks, and I think that will be the thing. It's like, you can't run it back with Kyle McCord and hope for different results next year. But, I mean, I don't know. I think you shouldn't overreact to Ryan Day, because I think he's going to win you 10, 11 games, 10 at the absolute worst year over year.
He's winning 11 games.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, I think I would just chill on moving on from Ryan Day if I were a Buckeye fan, is my advice.
Yeah, I'm with you. 56-7 now in his 6 years at Ohio State. Well, I guess no. Some of that includes the interim stuff with Urban Meyer. So 56-7 overall. That's almost 90%, 89% winning percentage. If you can poach a guy who's like Vrabel, he was NFL Coach of the Year at some point, right? Like, with what he's done in Tennessee. I'm sure, like, if you can poach a guy like that, sure, like, that's an X factor. If he wants to be in college, if he's a good recruiter, who knows? But yeah, if you can get an NFL coach, that's a different story. But I'm with you. Like, who wants to take a job if you know finishing top 5 every year isn't good enough? We got to win a national championship.
I agree. Well, let's pivot quickly to some coaching stuff, Matt Green. I ask you first, now that it's done, more intrigued, Matt Green, Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State or Mike Elko to Texas A&M? What intrigues you more in the SEC here?
Just because I don't have as much to say about it, I'll start with Jeff Lebby, because that just fits perfectly, like what we're talking about. Like, Mississippi State's got, not that it's a gimmick, but they got to have a guy with a shtick, with with just his thing. That's like, we're gonna have this different looking offense that teams are gonna have to prepare for every week. Like, we're gonna sneak up on some people if they're overlooking us when they got Alabama next week on their schedule. So yeah, I think that's exactly what Mississippi State had to do from that perspective. So I love that one. And then from Texas A&M's perspective, I'm honestly laughing at Texas A&M fans. If Texas A&M fans had any sort of impact on A&M not hiring Mark Stoops, if the negative backlash was so strong that actually changed the thought process, you guys are clowns right now. Like, who the hell is Mike Elko compared to Mark Stoops? He's Mark Stoops just with less experience. Like, he's Mark Stoops like a few steps lower on the rung. Like, he's having success at a basketball school that's never had success in football before. Like, yeah, Mark Stoops does that. Like, this idea that Mark Stoops was not a big time hire, I think, is like a joke. Like, A&M fan, like, who are you, Texas A&M, to think you're better than Mark Stoops? And if you weren't satisfied with the Mark Stoops hire, what does Mike Elko do for you? Like, that's not Ryan Day. That's not Kalen DeBoer. Like, that's a more boring hire than than Mark Stoops, in my opinion. That's a guy you're also kind of extrapolating, like what is his ceiling with our resources and with our recruiting footprint and all of that. Like, that's the same way you're extrapolating a guy like Stoops, that like, oh, he's winning 7, 8, 9 games at Kentucky every year. Yeah, he's winning 7, 8, 9 games at Kentucky every year. Like, you give him Texas A&M's recruiting budget, that state of Texas to recruit in, like the NIL stuff. We all know about the boosters with A&M and everything. Like, I thought Mark Stoops would have been an absolute like home run hire. It felt similar to what LSU did with Brian Kelly, that it's like, we're so good, we don't need to like have some sort of take some crazy approach to this. Let's go get a guy who's proven to be like the model of consistency, like at Notre Dame, like Brian Kelly, and with a higher ceiling at LSU, he'll just have us very solid every single year. I'm shocked to see that they had like one of the worst defenses in the country this year. So, we'll see if that pans out. But I felt like Mark Stoops was such a great hire. And now Mike Elko, it's like everything he does, it's like kind of going to be like, it feels like it's an added pressure if the fans actually had a role in Mark Stoops not getting the job.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny that it ended up with Mike Elko anyway, where he was the original target, right? Like, they did end up with the guy who was first rumored. He's been the long suspected guy. He has experience there, obviously, as the DC for 3 years, and was a great DC for Jimbo Fisher at A&M before he moved on to Duke. And look, he's been great at Duke. Duke finished undefeated at home in the ACC this year, Matt Green. Like, it's Duke. Like, this was a program in really bad shape before he took over at the end of the Cutcliffe era there, and he revitalized it. And I mean, he has a top 10 quarterback, I think, in this class committed. So I don't know what happens there for Duke, but I mean, he turned that program around. It's super bright guy, went to Penn, played football there, all that kind of stuff. He's been successful wherever he's gone as a DC. And like you said, Stoops was not a flashy hire, but it was like one of those where it's like, he would have been fine. And you did flashy with Jimbo. You did flashy with these crazy recruiting classes. You just got away from flashy by bringing on Petrino and everything else. And you just need to be solid. And that's what they're ultimately going to be with Mike Elko. I don't know if Mike Elko will be good enough to win a national title, but I'm also like, there's not many people who are. Like, it's going to be, you're A&M, you've never won a national title. That's not your program. You need to be solid because you have these awesome resources. You can sign the number 1 class in college football 1 year because you have that. Like, that's a great resource. Hire just a good football coach. Hire someone that you just know is going to put a competent football team on the field each and every Saturday. And that's what you're getting with Stoops, and that's what you're getting with Elko. So it could have been disastrous based on how the Stoops stuff unfolded over the last 12 to 24 hours. But ultimately, I mean, they got their guy, and I think Elko is actually a really strong hire. It just was a really weird way and a very A&M SEC way of getting to the guy, because obviously reminded a lot of folks of Schiano and Tennessee from many years ago before Pruitt was ultimately hired, where the fans revolted and the fans were like, no. But Elko's okay.
Exactly. And the Pruitt thing worked out very poorly for Tennessee. Yep. So it's like, regardless of what fans think, it's like fans want the Braves to sign Josh Donaldson to a 5-year contract after his one good year in Atlanta. And then they don't. And then it turns out that was a really good decision by the Braves to not sign that. It's like, these decision makers know what they're doing. So it's like, I'm almost alarmed on both ends, because like, it's like A&M fans were pissed about it when they shouldn't have really been. But then it's like, if I'm an A&M fan and I actually had a say, our opinion had a sway in what the A&M administration did. It's like, well, why are you guys listening to us? Like, that's also kind of a red flag. You guys should know. I thought you guys did your research. Like, even if there was some backlash, you'd think we got the right guy, whatever. I spent a lot of the time talking about Mark Stoops and more than Elko. I do think Elko's a good hire. To me, it's just a hilarious second guy to get, to be unsatisfied with Mark Stoops, and you just go get a guy who's almost built in the same Mark Stoops mold, who's also doing it at a basketball school. But yeah, I think ultimately with his ties to A&M, I think that's a huge part of why he's getting this job. And I think it is a good hire ultimately. But I think with how this worked out, I think there just is an added pressure Like Jeremy Pruitt didn't have the longest rope, like how long did he last? 3 years? And obviously there's other stuff going on off the field with recruiting and all that, but I don't know. I think it kind of it adds an extra magnifying glass like to his tenure just right off the bat. But I do think Elko is a good hire for sure.
No, I agree. And I think it's a program with a lot of talent. We'll see who he's able to keep in the boat from these past couple classes and who exits. But I mean, he's obviously got a lot of experience in the portal. And I think the reporting was he has a lot of good relationships, high school level in Texas. There's a lot of talent there. So that'll be good. And I mean, it's going to be good football and a good battle. And I like the contrast between him and Sark coming in the SEC. Great offensive mind, elite offensive mind versus elite defensive mind for these guys. I'm very interested to see what he does at OC, though, for Mississippi State. Matt Green. Though South Carolina and Florida are officially not going bowling here, who in your estimation had a more disappointing season on their way to 5-7 this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. With Florida starting 5-2, it's like the expectations were recalibrated. So theirs definitely feels more disappointing. You lost 5 straight games to end the season. Like, you needed to win one of those to make a bowl game. And obviously, you played like 3 top 10, top 15 teams in that time. So it weren't going to be easy games. But Florida feels more, and then what they played out of conference with Utah early on, and obviously Tennessee and Kentucky early in the season. But I think with Florida's schedule, you just give them a little more leeway, and it's year 2. Obviously, we see a lot of jumps in year 2, and Florida definitely did not have the year 2 bump by any means with Billy Napier. But with South Carolina, I don't know. There's not many games that South Carolina is supposed to win that they're not winning at the same time. But what are we in now? Year 4 of Shane Beamer, and we're missing bowl games. It's like it kind of feels worse from South Carolina's perspective, even though Florida's got a higher standard of like where they expect to be. But I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm riding the fence. Who do you think is more disappointing?
I think it's Florida. Like, there's still a lot of talent here. I think Florida starting 5-2 and finishing this way and losing all of your rivalry games outside of Tennessee early on this year. I mean, this was rough. And you had opportunities to win this game, like obviously against Florida State and up in their season late at home. And it's just it's embarrassing. Like, when they implode, Florida really implodes. And obviously the spitting stuff this week, that wasn't a great look. The double targeting on Tate Roadmaker late that ended up costing the game because it was a penalty and it extends the drive and Benson runs it in. I don't know, man. You give up 52 to LSU. You're embarrassed there. You lose to a terrible Arkansas team at home that you just have to have. I don't know, man. You look at it, you get destroyed by Kentucky on the road. This is rough, man. I just think if you're a Florida fan, you're like, this is not the norm. Like, I think this is embarrassing. Like, South Carolina, 5-7, it is what it is, man. Like, it's just,
that's like 2 games below your goal.
Yeah. Florida, there's a reason this has not happened in 70 years, going 5-7 back-to-back years. Like, this is uncharted waters. And you're going into 2024 where schedule's only getting harder. Like, it's going to be hard to get to 5-7 next year. So I just look at it as like, I think it's Florida had the more embarrassing, or just, I don't know. If you're a Florida fan, you're just demoralized. I feel like South Carolina, you're like, bounce back. All right, we're about where we thought we were going to be, 7-5, 6-6. All right, we'll hit the portal hard, finish up strong. We have a couple good recruits, and they have a good edge guy, Stewart, from the DC area. Like, they could talk themselves into like 7-5, 8-4 next year. They don't have SEC championship expectations. Florida is the number 3 recruiting class right now in 247 for next year. There's a lot of talent on this roster. You have 2 great backs. You have 2 great receivers in Wilson and Pearsall. Like, you have talent. Odom's now in the portal here for Florida right out of the gate. But I'm like, I think Florida, there's just no excuse to be this bad, even in year 2. And to fumble the bag down the stretch like this, 5-2, I think it's Florida for me. And it's not really close.
Yeah, I think you sold me, because you look at this 5-7 for South Carolina. Look at these losses. Who are they? Who did they think preseason they were going to beat? North Carolina, Georgia, at Tennessee, Florida, at Missouri, at Texas A&M, and Clemson.
Probably just Missouri out of that.
You didn't really think you were going to win many of those games coming
Yeah.
in preseason, whereas Florida, obviously you can make that same argument with the Missouri. The Missouri's the X factor there because no one expected them to be so good, but you didn't expect to get blasted to Kentucky the way you did. You also you may not have expected to beat Tennessee, so that was kind of a wash there. Going on the road at Utah, first game of the season, was going to be tough anyways, but
they didn't have their starting quarterback.
The Arkansas one was the only bad loss down the stretch. I mean, it's you lost your last 5, and 4 of those teams were in the top 10. I guess LSU isn't top 10, but yeah. So they also had a lot of losable games on the schedule preseason, and I think that's what their win. Was it 4.5 preseason? Yeah. So I think they did go over that, but yeah, I think you're right. Just with the standard that's at Florida, and you started 5-2, like it doesn't really matter what we thought in August. When you start 5-2, you should end up in a bowl game. So to lose to an Arkansas team that had no pulse for most of the second half of the season, like it was just kind of inexcusable.
Well, that's all I've got, Matt Green. Conference championship weekend ahead. It's going to be a lot of fun games. UW, Oregon, Bama, Georgia, Florida State, Louisville. I'm not going to watch Michigan, Iowa. Texas.
Is there at least, do we know the times of all the games? Like, is Michigan, Iowa, like competing with something else? Because then if it's on the same time as Louisville,
I feel like it's always at night. I feel like that's always a night game.
Yeah. That ACC and Big Ten are both at 8:00, and then we got Pac-12's on Friday, right? And that's been several years in a row now. And then it's weird to play the whole season at noon, and then with Big Noon with the Big Ten, and wait till Saturday night to decide the SEC champ or the Big Ten championship. But yeah, I think Georgia is sitting at like a 5.5 point favorite with Alabama early on. So I think that's actually changed. I think it may have opened at like 3.5, 4. And so there's a lot of activity on Georgia early on. But yeah, I'm excited for it, man. The last thing I was going to say was we don't talk a lot of Heisman on here. And is there another argument for anyone not named Jaden Daniels to win the Heisman Trophy right now? I think Carson Beck was getting in that conversation. And obviously the team success was going to lead Carson Beck more than anything. I think the way Georgia was able to run the ball, and they ran for like 250 yards against Georgia Tech, and he didn't do much passing. I think Carson Beck's kind of out of the actual Heisman legitimate talk. Outside of Bo Nix and Michael Penix, like I guess they're the other candidates right now. But I think Jaden Daniels is the clear winner in my eyes. Do you see it differently?
No, I think it's Jaden. I don't know if he's going to win, though. Like, I think Bo seems like he's going to win, especially if they win on Saturday. But I don't think he should. Like, you just watch those Oregon games. It's yak stuff. It's all the playmakers. Like, Bo's been solid, but at no point have I felt that Bo Nix is the best quarterback in the country, and not even really close. And I don't know. It's a narrative thing. He's a feel-good story. Oregon's awesome, but Jaden Daniels is doing ungodly stuff week over week. And it's a Johnny Manziel type year for Jaden Daniels. I don't know how you don't give it to Daniels, even with this team going 9-3, because wins aren't totally a QB stat. And they should, like, when you have a defense that bad, and like some of the stuff he's done, especially like at Mizzou, and I mean what he did against Florida and this, that, and the other. Like, I mean, it's just Jaden Daniels.
I'd say it's more. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know what he's supposed to do. Like, he can't play defense.
Yeah, I'd say it's more the Tebow, RG3, Lamar Jackson type of Heisman, where like Johnny Manziel had the Heisman moment and the beating the best win of the season and all that. You know, even though they didn't have the team quote unquote success, they went like 11-2, but they didn't win anything per se, a conference, or anything like that. But yeah, it seems like sometimes the stats are just so undeniable, and it's like Jaden Daniels. You watch this guy play, and he's absurd what he does. And I think he's now the 5th guy in SEC history with 50+ touchdowns, and the other 4 all won the Heisman. And I don't know those off the top of my head, but I think it's Tebow, Cam Newton, and Joe Burrow. And is Johnny Manziel, did he have 50 total touchdowns? Those might be the 4 right there, but
I feel like that's the case. But yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how many touchdowns like Danny Werfel threw for or something. I don't know.
I don't
but
know.
Probably
Who
not
cares?
that. 30. Let me see. 37. Oh yeah. Johnny Manziel had 26 and 21. So he only had 47 total touchdowns in 2012. So I'm not sure who that fifth one is, but yeah, I saw that stat earlier. And yeah, Jaden Daniels, to me, he's been the best player in college football. Give him the award. Bo Nix wins it. I feel like there's this idea that if you're hating on Bo Nix or you say anything negative about Bo Nix, it's that like, oh, you're just talking Auburn Bo Nix. It's like, no, we acknowledge he's gotten better. But it is, like you said, it's a lot of short stuff. I was impressed in that Oregon State game. There's a lot more of the downfield throws than I was kind of expecting, kind of you've seen a lot throughout the year. But still, it's a lot of yak stuff, like you're saying. He's like completing like 80% of his passes. It's cool, but Jaden Daniels, this guy is just on another level. It's RG3 was doing his game on Saturday. RG3 is just like, yes, this is the Heisman. Track speed, big time stats. RG3 will sign off on that all day.
Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in a couple days.